For 100 years, National Wildlife Refuges have preserved America's natural heritage. The National Wildlife Refuge system is the largest system of lands in the world dedicated to placing wildlife first. Apart from the ever-known national parks that deals with wildlife conservation per se, the refuge's role is to maintain the natural habitat and all the wildlife species that are in the category of endangered species for the future generation. Also conserving islands, beaches, and estuaries, nice sea waters. The two of the wildlife refuges under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services that will be highlighted in this particular program are the Chincoteague and Assateague Island. Most of the refuge is located on the Virginia end of Assateague Island. However, 418 acres are on the Maryland side of the island and 427 acres are found on Morris Island, and 546 acres comprise Wildcat Marsh on the northern tip of Chincoteague. Refuge boundaries extend south and encompass all or part of the following barrier islands: Assawoman, Metomkin, and Cedar. The refuge's location along the Atlantic Flyway makes it a vital resting and feeding spot for a large number and diversity of birds. Chincoteague Refuge, originally established in 1943 to provide habitat for migratory birds with an emphasis on conserving greater snow geese, today provides habitat for waterfowl wading birds as well as other species of wildlife and plants.
Chincoteague got started back in the early years of colonization because we were isolated. A family from England came over to raise cattle. You know, an island is a good place to raise cattle. You don't have to build fences. And slowly over time, more and more people came in. It was discovered as a great place for fish and waterfowl, all of that sort of basic necessity of life they could gather from our area. Shellfish, finfish, they had fowl that would migrate in the winter. So it turned out to be a very sustainable living here. You could live off the land. And it stayed that way for many, many years. Now as things changed, of course, our island changed with it, but we still like to maintain that small, self-sufficient personality that we have, that we started with, that self-sufficientness.
Refuge staff manage this barrier island habitat to allow many species of wildlife to coexist, each establishing their own place in the environment.
This Assateague Island that you're standing on right now is in motion. It's moving very slowly to the west. The ocean comes up during storms or just during minor storm events and begins to eat away at the sand, mobilizes the sand, and then pushes that sand to the west. So this whole island that you're standing on right here is moving to the west very slowly. And you can see by the erosion, the beach erosion right here behind me, that shows that erosion, that mobilization of sand, which will be deposited on the west side. So the island is sort of rolling over as it goes over to the west very slowly, probably in the neighborhood of about 3 to 4 meters per year is moving to the west. So we like natural processes here because as you can see, the migratory birds really love these natural processes. They like the mobilized sand, they like the freshly deposited sand, It helps to open up a lot of their food sources and make the food sources more available to them. So the wildlife really like the natural processes. So we try not to interfere too much with those natural processes, but let them take place because it really improves wildlife habitat.
Refuge management programs restore threatened and endangered species and conserve local wildlife and plants. The refuge also provides wildlife-dependent recreational opportunities such as fishing, hunting, wildlife photography, and observation interpretation and environmental education.
We encourage surf fishing here, and surf fishing is where you use a pretty large rod and a pretty large reel and cast it with a pretty good sized weight, medium sized weight, out into the ocean. And many of the species that can be encountered out here are a lot of species of sharks, black drum, red drum, striped bass, what they call rockfish here. So fishing is a very popular activity on a National Wildlife Refuge and something we encourage. The fishing here in Virginia is managed by the Virginia Department of Inland Game and Fisheries. And so we encourage all of our anglers here on the National Wildlife Refuge to observe the rules and regulations imposed by Virginia, the state of Virginia. And we really support fishing here. It's what we refer to as a compatible use for a National Wildlife Refuge. It's one of our big six. It's one of the recreational activities that we really encourage on National Wildlife Refuges, along with hunting, outdoor photography, that sort of thing.
Remnants of Assateague Island's history can still be found on the refuge. For example, the famous Chincoteague ponies are a present-day reminder of Assateague Island's past. Although no one is certain when or how the ponies that escaped a shipwrecked Spanish galleon and swam ashore, however, most historians believe that settlers used the island for grazing livestock, including ponies and other farm animals in the 17th century to avoid fencing regulations and taxation. Regardless of their origin, the descendants of these ponies are still living here today. The Chincoteague ponies are owned and managed by the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Company and have a strong culture tie to the local community. The refuge will implement a pony management plan that meets multiple objectives, such as allowing events, managing visitors, viewing, and the grazing program. The refuge will continue to allow a maximum herd size of 150 ponies. Talk Fire Company locals would need social services.
Chincoteague ponies are owned and managed through the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Company that are owned within the town of Chincoteague. And we provide the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Company a grazing permit or special use permit to graze 150 horses on the refuge. And the ponies are on the refuge in two different areas. The southern pony unit is about 600 acres on the south side of the island, in the Virginia side. And the northern pony unit is over 3,000 acres on the northern side in the Virginia area of the refuge. The ponies roam free in those areas, and they're maintained through the fire company and those 3 roundups a year. The biggest being the July roundup in the last week of July, which they have the pony roundup and also the pony swim and auction of the foals of the year. Well, again, the ponies are separated into 2 areas, and those areas separate some of the conflicts from human use. So the ponies are less likely to be fed artificial foods like potato chips and popcorn that people may have in their picnic baskets when they come to the refuge. And that's by design by the southern pony viewing area off of Beach Road. So the public can see the ponies, but they can't interact with them very closely. During the July roundup has the most interaction with the ponies come down the wild beach and pass the public on their way to the corrals before they take their swim.
I came about being in the fire company because my father had Lou Gehrig disease when I was 6 years old. He died when I was 9, and the girl that I married, her father was in the fire company. So at a very early age, I was going with this girl when I was 15 years old, and her father was on the pony committee. This is the committee that takes care of the ponies within the fire company. And I palled around with him until I went in the Navy. And then when I came out in 1976, I joined the fire company, worked my way up to the president of the company. And during the Ash Wednesday storm of 1962, my father was in a rocking bed like an iron lung, and the fire company came to him. They had to have electricity for the bed. So the fire company, when the power went out, the fire company brought gasoline, they brought a generator, and they kept him alive throughout the storm. And I said, if I can ever give back, I will give back to my community the way they did. So I joined the fire company and have helped save a lot of lives. Chincoteague is located 5 miles out into the ocean. I mean, it's a long causeway. The nearest hospital is an hour south or an hour north. It's a long way to go to be doing CPR or trying to save someone's life, advanced life support. With that being said, the locals pretty much depend on the local fire department. If you go to a major accident on the causeway, it's a 2-lane road for 5 miles, a high rate of speed, a lot of car accidents. When you go over there and you come up upon a scene, the doctors will actually step away and let the fire company, the EMTs, and the shock trauma techs take over to stabilize the patient. So we've picked up a lot of people in accidents and fires, and right now the tourism is really taking over the island. It used to be more of a seafood industry. Now it's tourism. Thousands of middle-aged to old people like myself are riding bikes now, riding mopeds. So we've gone from more car accidents to more moped and bicycle accidents, and we've picked up a ton of people every year.
Another type of habitat found on the refuge is wetlands, which consist of both salt and freshwater areas. This habitat is vital to black ducks and many other migratory birds for nesting and feeding.
Well, the wildlife habitat here in the refuge is protected, and we do manage that through conservation actions. All the wildlife and habitat management actions, from mowing, burning, spraying for invasive species, and making sure that the habitat is protected for the future. The ponies that are again here through the fire company, through a special use permit, and grazing on the refuge. So by providing the habitat, the ponies will sustain, for many years to come.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service refuge managers and biologists manage habitats on national wildlife refuges to conserve, restore, and protect fish, wildlife, and plants. Habitat management ensures Americans that their natural resource heritage will be conserved for future generations to enjoy.
So on Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge, we have a big game hunting season, and we allow hunting of white-tailed deer, which is a native species to Virginia and North America. And we also have a little non-native invasive species called a sika deer, or it's actually a small elk. And so we have hunting of both of those species here on Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge by firearm and also by archery, which includes compound bow, longbow, and crossbow. So we don't allow any other upland game hunting other than just big game. So white-tailed deer and sika are the only 2 upland game species that are hunted on the refuge. We do allow some waterfowl hunting in the marshes that surround the refuge. So our hunting programs are managed so that we maintain sustainable populations of those hunted species. In regard to the non-native sika deer, we would like to totally eliminate them. We know that that's not possible because of all their little hiding places that they have and just the sheer number of sika deer here. But the idea is sustainability. So we manage our populations here so that we'll always have populations of huntable wildlife for the public to enjoy.
Chincoteague Refuge is one of the most visited refuges in the nation, receiving approximately 1.5 million visits each year. A host of exhibits displays brochures and wildlife-oriented programs, and films are available to visitors. Refuge staff and volunteers are available to answer questions and help plan activities.
Well, I've always enjoyed the Refuge. I was visiting here for many years and I ultimately moved to this area. And I just like sharing with people where the birds are, about the beach, about the historic lighthouse. I really enjoy it here, so I like sharing that with other people.
Chincoteague Association that has been formed by organized volunteers on how they can assist the refuge to educate the public. The association has been here for long, since 1950.
Well, basically the Chincoteague Natural History Association was formed by a group of people a long time ago. I guess it was pretty close around in the 50s. They got together to see how they could help the refuge educate the people. And these people were, really far thinking in all of that. And it's kind of funny with the name History Association, but it was formed for the simple fact of education of how, nature and people cooperate together. So basically what our association does, like with this vehicle in the background, we do charge a fee for it, but this money goes right back into a fund for the refuge. We're a nonprofit, so the only thing that we take out of there is just money to operate and all of that. And we help by bringing these tours out here. And like Bob said, the fact is that we ask the people, what are you here to see first? We see the birds, different flora, fauna, and all of this, or the horses. And we kind of pattern the tour, or the trek as we call it, to that. And like now, we're able to stop, show them, and they can get out there and get their own pictures and all of this stuff. We do have an interpreter on board that fills in regards with the history of the area, the history of the refuge, what the refuge is trying to do in regards with the animals that are out here and everything, and to educate, again, the people why the refuge is here, number one. And it's for the future, the young kids like that one right over there, to show them, to keep this area like this, to show them exactly what's going on. And that's the big thing. This is what we want to do.
Surf fishing is a popular refuge activity. Boats are permitted to land on designated areas on Tom's Cove Hook from September to March. A variety of paved trails are open to hikers and bicyclists. Hunting big game waterfowl and rail hunting are available by permit during designated periods and only in certain areas.
So they're allowed to hunt on the refuge itself. We have a population of whitetail and sika deer. So on the refuge itself, they hunt those deer, and it's state regulated, Fish and Wildlife Service regulated. Then also we are in the Atlantic Flyway for migrating waterfowl, so that brings a lot of hunters here as well. So we have many things we can do, everything from a verbal warning up into the effect an arrest for those violations. I'd say normally it can be resolved in issuing summonses and maybe seizing gear and going through the court system that way. We do everything from what we consider high profile, which is how you see us today, in uniform in the marked vehicles and marked boats, to, we'll go out dressed as hunters ourselves and kind of intermix in everything. And you find more that, more compliance comes from high profile law enforcement, whereas if you're out there just kind of intermixed, you'll see violations that you wouldn't normally see if you were dressed like we are today. So, and it's everything from vehicle patrol to foot patrol to boat patrol, ATV. We have a wide range
of patrols that we're able to do.
Due to the presence of Chincoteague Refuge and Assateague has created various business opportunities such as hotels, restaurants, to name just a few.
My family owns a hotel, so we see tourism that way. I am a charter boat captain, so I run eco tours around the island, seeing different wildlife. We go out in the ocean and see dolphin, and come up and see the ponies and the different bird life. So I'm involved with the tourism industry all the way around. And then, of course, I get to do the mayor's job as well. Also, part of my duties is also part of the volunteer fire company that have to do with the wild ponies over here on Assateague. So that's another big family thing that we, my father started with the ponies when he was a young man, and we've just continued on with that tradition.
My parents put this building here in 1975, and that was in the early days of tourism for our area. And they had this piece of land, and they weren't quite sure what to do with it, so they moved an old building here and converted it into an ice cream parlor. So we just grew from there. Well, I think that I think most people are happy that the refuge is there. There's no move to say develop it or see anything built there by anybody that I know. But there's some tension, obviously, being owned by the federal government. They're not always as responsive to local needs as we'd like them to be. Maybe it would be better if it was state-owned, and they'd be a little closer in line with what maybe it'd be a little better balance, I guess is what I'm saying. But on balance, it's better that it's owned by the people and protected for the people. So it'll always be there. To be enjoyed by anyone who wants to visit.
In 1965, Congress established the Assateague Island National Seashore, encompassing Chincoteague Refuge as well as the northern portion of Assateague Island. The legislation stated that the primary management of Chincoteague Refuge was for public recreation, including interpretation and education. Equal opportunity to participate and benefit from the programs and activities of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is available to all individuals regardless of age, race, religion, color, sex, national origin, or disability. Within workdays access to millions of people, Chincoteague Refuge is one of the most visited refuges in the United States, providing visitors with outstanding opportunities to learn about and enjoy wildlands and wildlife.